My name is Dotan Saguy. I'm a documentary photographer based in Los Angeles. And I wanted to thank Leica for sponsoring the event and B&H for having me here again. It's my third time here, but I haven't been here in a while, so it's been a couple of years since I was here. But the nice thing about being here for the third time is I won't bore you too much with my whole background. I'm not going to go all the way back and tell you again about how I got here. I'll just mention a few things that are relevant to this topic that we're going to cover today, which is about the personal project. So for the rest, if you're interested in the rest of my background, you can watch The Evolution of a Street Photographer, which we recorded here 3 years ago already. And there's a lot of helpful tips in it. It's not just about me. It's a lot about what I had learned and my journey and what I wanted to share with the rest of the photographers out there that I thought might be helpful to them. And then the other one I did 2 years ago was about was when I was publishing my first book, Venice Beach, which is actually here. And so both of them have a lot of practical tips. The second one more on publishing a book, if anybody's interested in that. So a couple of things before we get started. One, I'll leave time for questions at the end. So if you have questions, please write them down or remember them. I would love to answer them at the end of the presentation. And you'll see a lot of pictures while I talk. So like this picture right here, they come from both of the projects we'll be talking about that I'll show you. They'll be mostly my pictures. From time to time, I'll be using other people's pictures. And the way you can tell the difference is that theirs is better. No, it's joking, but I mean, it might be. But when it's somebody else's picture, you'll see their name. So I'll put the credits. Anything that you don't see credits, these are my pictures. So a lot of good things have happened for me in photography in the past 2 years since I was here last time. And one of them was that actually starting to teach with Leica, in Leica Academy. And I got to meet a lot of students, and it's been really, I think I've learned as much from them as they've learned from me. One of the things that I found, though, by talking to all the students was that a lot of them had one opportunity to really improve their photography, and I wasn't seeing really many of them take advantage of that yet. So I decided to come here to really try to push that idea, and it wasn't that they didn't have enough gear. A lot of them had, the latest gear that had great stuff. Some of which I wish I had. And it wasn't that they weren't doing enough workshops. They were coming to my workshops. They had done other workshops, so they were really getting great instruction. The one thing that I didn't see them do was personal projects. And that's why I decided to come here to talk about that today. I was surprised about how few people were taking on personal projects. So today I wanted to talk about that, and first of all, define a little bit what they are. So I'll just tell you what we're going to talk about, so you know the whole structure of the talk here. But personal project, what are they? And it was actually interesting to put a definition together because I had never thought about that in that context. Secondly, my own experience with them and why I feel like it's important, what they've done for me in my career so far. How do most photographers start one? There's actually interesting data that just came out as I was putting the presentation together that I was able to put in here, that I discovered myself for the first time. Sort of statistics about how people start a personal project. Then how to find the right personal project that's right for you, which there's a little bit of a science to the madness that I wanted to explain that I sort of figured out for myself, and that's been very useful. Then I want to talk about traps to avoid when you start a personal project, because there's a lot of sort of roadblocks that appear. Some of them are real, some of them are not, and I wanted to just help people avoid those pitfalls. And we'll finish with some inspiration with some well-known personal projects, and that hopefully will give you ideas and inspire you to start if you haven't already. So first off, I'm going to try to give a definition of a personal project. To me, it's the pursuit of a topic it's a photographic pursuit of a topic that the photographer has access to and passion for. And you'll see how those 2 points are really important. We'll develop them further, but it's usually something that you photograph that you have access to and you have a great passion for. It usually results in a series of images that are sequenced to tell a story or narrative. And it can take all kinds of form. I mean, it's usually long-term, but it ranges in duration. It ranges in size and complexity and photographic genre. It could be portrait, it could be landscape, it could be photojournalism, documentary, and so on. So there's a lot of forms that it can take, but usually it's something that you have access to and great passion for, and you make a series of images. So why do I feel so strongly about the personal project that I wanted to come talk here today? Well, they've done a lot for my own personal career. I started, photography like in the early 90s. So I've photographed pretty much my whole adult life. And it's only about 5 years ago that I started really shooting professionally. And in that short span of time, there's 2 personal projects, those 2, that have had a major impact on my career. And so I'll tell you about them in a few minutes just so you understand what they've done for me, and then we'll move on to the rest. So my Venice Beach project started as a casual street photography really a few years ago. And there's like 2014, 15, so around the time I was kind of turning professional. And at the time I was just shooting all over Los Angeles. It wasn't meant to be something about Venice Beach. But I quickly realized that I loved shooting there so much that each time I had time to shoot, I'd be like, where should I go? And I ended up, I really like to shoot on Venice Beach today. So I was sort of attracted there by like this mysterious force. So it's that passion that really kind of pulled me there. I wasn't really thinking about it as a personal project yet at the time. So there was one day, and thank God for what's great about photos is you always have a timestamp. So I can go back and figure, by timestamp, I know that on February 25th, 2015 is really when that idea of a personal project crystallized in my mind, because I was photographing this group of kids, teenagers, young adults, skateboarding around in Venice Beach. It was 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. We were the only people there. It was a weekday. It was really empty, and I was like, wow, these guys are phenomenal. I want to take sort of a candid portrait of the group and everything, but I didn't want to disturb them or anything, and I wanted really something candid. So I started photographing them, and naturally, because I was the only person there, they started asking, what are you photographing this for? It wasn't like a confrontational thing. It was more, they were curious why I was there and sitting right in front of them and taking photos. And I felt like if I'm gonna get the photo I want, I have to make them comfortable with my presence, and I have to stay there for a while. It might take 15 minutes, might take half an hour, but they have to get comfortable with me being there and we being the only people in that street. So I was trying to think of something credible to say, so that they would accept, my presence for that time. And I said, well, I'm doing a project about Venice Beach, and I think this might be published as a book someday. I was saying it half, because I wanted to sound credible to them and for them to accept my presence, and the other half was like, maybe that's what I'm doing. And that's really, I think, when if I think back, this is the day that it clicked in my head that this could be a project and it might at some point become a book. So as soon as it morphed into that, more serious, focused personal project, all kinds of things started happening. I spent a lot more time on Venice Beach shooting. I was going there a lot more often. I was thinking about all the aspects I wanted to capture, all the type of characters I needed to have for a complete, project on Venice Beach. And things started to happen because I was there more often. I was there, with more intent. This photo, which was not very much after the one I just showed, it might have been around the same time. This one was one of the top finalists for the National Geographic Travel Photographer of the Year Award in 2016. So things, even on individual photographs, even before the whole project was published, I was starting to really get results just because I was just much more focused on one thing and sort of getting the hang of it. it was the other thing I noticed. It became really enriching on a personal level. Being this focused on one project, I was really getting to meet over and over the same interesting people, and really forging friendships, with some of those people that were completely outside of my social, circle. Those are people I had never met before. I had never met, I was hanging out with surfers and homeless people and street performers and bodybuilders, skateboarders. They were buddies because I was coming back so often. They knew me. They were comfortable with my presence, and the project was picking up speed because I was more comfortable with them. They were more comfortable with me, and so I was getting better results. And it was just very enriching on a personal level. I really felt like each time I was going there, I was traveling. It was only like 5-6. I live 6 miles away, literally, from Venice Beach, but it felt like traveling to like other people's lives, which was a real treat, for me each time. So when the body of work was finished, a couple years later, all kinds of doors started opening as well. It was published as a monograph by one of the most prestigious photo book publishers, Kara Verlag. So I have copies of the book here, if people are interested. And the work was exhibited in Europe and in the US. It got incredible press coverage, which meant that the body of work was published in all these different places. Much easier to publish when you have something like a book coming out, because then there's the press for the book. And as I mentioned before, I started becoming a regular instructor for Leica Academy, and I taught my first workshop, of course, on Venice Beach. So a lot of things just happened. I'm not saying all this to brag or anything. It's just to explain how much came out of that one personal project and kind of my focus on it. I also started, this is more recently, an ambassadorship with DxO Labs, which is the maker of the Nik collection. I don't know if people are familiar with Nik Silver effects, but I can share. They give me a link for free trial if you guys are interested. I'll share that at the end. And I started getting represented by galleries. Anyway, lots of things came out of that. So, this personal project really jump-started my professional photography career. And after this project was done and the book was published, I started working on another project, which is about vehicle dwellers. When I was in Venice, I saw there were a lot of people. I don't know if you guys get much of this here, but in California, a lot of people have started to live in vans and RVs, and it's something that's been going on since the 60s and everything. But it's really increasing at an alarming rate right now, and they're doing it for all kinds of different reasons. Some people are really completely, this is sort of the last step for them before being literally on the street. Some people do it more as a life choice, and everything in between. So I thought that was fascinating, and I wanted to do a project about that. So the first body of work I've completed so far is my second personal project that I'm publishing, and it's specifically about this family who's got a very interesting background. They're a Mormon family from Brazil who lives in a school bus, a converted school bus, with 3 young children who you can see on this photograph. There's a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old way in the back, and a 10-year-old sitting on the top of the bus. So once again, it was a very special experience. I was befriending them and hanging out with them for almost a whole year, and documenting their lifestyle and their daily life in this bus. So rather than talk more about the project, there's a Kickstarter right now for the book that's coming out in the spring. So I'll just show you it's a 2-minute video, so we can just I'll just show you that. We'll give you more of an idea for the project. Meet the Reese family: Izzy, Grace, and their 3 kids, ages 10, 5, and 2. This school bus is their home. They were brought up in a traditional Mormon community in Brazil, and they recently came to the US to chase the American dream. I met them the day their school bus rolled into Los Angeles, and I photographed their life on the streets of LA for the next 10 months. Hi, my name is Dotan Saguy. I'm a documentary photographer based in Los Angeles. Today I'm here to introduce my second coffee table book, Nowhere to Go But Everywhere. You might remember my first book, Venice Beach, which was launched right here on Kickstarter 2 years ago. But let's get back to the Reese family. How did they end up living in the school bus? What's it like to live in such a small, precarious space with young children? How do they educate their kids? How do they make a living? Has street life changed their Mormon faith? What were their most vulnerable moments like? How about their happiest moments? These are just some of the topics I explore in the book, with plenty of images, of course, but also pages and pages of interviews that I conducted with the family to give you the full depth of their story. And how will the book get made? Well, I brought the band back together. Once again, Gail Fisher edited and sequenced the book with me. Gail was a senior editor at the LA Times and National Geographic for many years. Alexa Becker of Kara Verlag, the German publisher who did such a great job with my first book, is getting her team ready to start the book design. Andrea Smith, my publicist, is on board as well. Andrea was the director of communications at Aperture for nearly a decade. My first book sold so quickly in great part thanks to the amazing press coverage she obtained. So reserve your copy right now on Kickstarter. It will ensure that you get a first edition signed copy before they run out, and it will also help me make the payment to the publisher so we can get the book to press as soon as possible. Thank you for your support. So the Kickstarter's live. It ends pretty soon, so if you want to check it out, you're welcome to do that. For the people who will watch this on YouTube, Kickstarter will probably be over, but you can probably pre-order from my website at that point. Anyway, so the work is not even published yet, and it's already opened a lot of doors. There's obviously another book on the way. There's solo exhibitions that are already planned, and so on. So, I mean, you get the point. You know, those projects really get a lot of mileage you know, they've been key for me in my photography career. So the question is, how do you start one? You know, so I guess the couple of questions that came to my mind when I thought about that is, when are people advanced enough in their photography to start a personal project, and how should they go about starting one? So the first thing is, you know, I'd say to ask yourself when you're good enough to start a personal project, it's almost like asking, when are you good enough in Spanish to go and travel to Mexico? You know, it's all you need is really a few words and a lot of curiosity, but chances are everyone here, I think, is already experienced enough to start a personal project. It's really just a question of, it's not much about, are you good enough? It's really, how good do you want to get? Is it something, do you want to, you know, if you want to make a lot of progress with your photography, really it's a no-brainer. So the burning question at this point is, how do you start one? So this book actually came out, photo work, came out last month, I think, I mean, I was at Paris Photo and they were signing it. It just came out. It's a really interesting book. It has 12 questions that were asked to 40 different established photographers, the same 12 questions, and you see how they each answer those 12 questions. The first questions happen to be, how do you start a personal project? Do you start with a project idea? Or this is the chicken or the egg, basically. Do you start with a project idea, or do you start with photographs that lead to a concept that suggests an idea? Does that make sense? So it's fascinating to read 40 different people who are, you know, really established and have done a bunch of these, answer how they did it. And so I'm curious what your guess is. So I'm going to start with people who start with at least a vague project idea. What percentage of those 40 different photographers do you think that would be, that start at least with a project idea? Any guesses?
Small.
Small? Anyone else? No? All right. So 44%, almost half of them, start with a project idea, at least some concept in mind of what they're going to do. 29% start with a bit of both. So either they start with a bit of both, or they start sometimes with a project idea, and sometimes it's the pictures that dictate the projects. Only about a quarter of them start with single images that lead to a project. So that was fascinating to me to learn that. Those stats are nowhere, by the way. I read through all 40 of the answers and kind of coded what I thought they were saying. Sometimes it was, it wasn't black or white. It was, but anyway, this is pretty close to reality. And my personal experience, by the way, is very consistent with that, since the Venice Beach book was started more with single images, and then I was like, oh, this could be a project. But then for the new work, I started with an idea, and it became a project. My original idea, though, for the new project on vehicle dwellers evolved quite a bit. So, and that's very consistent with what other people's experience was in that book. I started I didn't think about doing a single family, or it wasn't going to be about a single subject. I thought I would do multiple subjects and be able to compare and contrast them in one body of work. So I started by going to many, many different people and started photographing some of them. And so I was basically casting at the same time as I was, trying out my idea basically of doing this project on multiple different people. And I found out that really it was really tough for me to do it that way. I wasn't having much fun doing it that way either. It was just a lot of work trying to get access. And then a lot of the work, I didn't like what I was producing. Like it didn't click, in terms of some people. I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. I don't know, I wasn't making as good as a connection. But with this family, I had a great connection. They were visually very interesting. They had a really interesting story. And the more I shot with them, the more I got to know them, the more I saw the depth of that story. And I figured that if I was going to put them in a body of work along with other people, I wasn't gonna capture the depth of their story. So basically my project sort of flipped at that point, and I decided I was gonna focus the whole project on them for now, and maybe later document other families or other people, but do one at a time to really give it the full depth of the story. So that project evolved. Started with an idea, but then evolved. And if you read Alex Soth's answer, he's a Magnum photographer, does amazing work. This is one of his pictures. So his answer in this book is very telling. So he says he usually starts with a vague idea. I start with a vague idea, but after the first exposure, this idea invariably is transformed. And by the time I'm done shooting, the original idea is barely recognizable. So it's a lot of photographers, you hear the same story, it's the same. It's interesting because their work is completely different, but they kind of got to it in the same way. So how do you find a project idea that's right for you? And so some of you might have seen this already, because I think I included it in some other presentations, but coming from the business world, before photography, I was in business and computer science and startups and so on. One of the books I loved from the 90s was Good to Great, written by Jim Collins. And he had one particular concept in this book, which was one chapter of the book called the hedgehog concept. And it went kind of like this. It's basically the whole point was, how do great companies find the right projects to work on? Because everybody's got limited resources, whether you're a company or a photographer. Photographer is mostly your time, and how do you decide to focus on certain projects that are right for you? So in terms of the companies, what he was talking about was, what are you deeply passionate about as a company to find your projects, and what are you the best in the world at? He was kind of exaggerating on that, but that was for effect. And then what drives your economic engine, what can keep you in business economically. So if you look at the intersection of those three circles, these are the projects you should focus on. So my translation of this to photography was, shoot what you love, then shoot what you know and have access to, what you're ideally positioned, what you're the best in the world, or the best positioned in the world for at shooting. It could be based on your location, your access, familiar cultures, languages, things that are personal to you. And then, the last circle is really up to you how important that is. But if you want to publish your work, find projects that are of interest to others, because otherwise it's really hard to publish. If it's only interesting to you, that might be very satisfying. That might be all you want. But if you ever want to publish and show it to other people, you do want to shoot it in a way, or you want to find subjects that will be interesting to them. So why shoot what you love? It seems obvious, but the best way I can explain it is the work will be better because you'll spend more time shooting, you'll be more empathetic with the subjects, you'll go really in depth, and your passion for the subject really shines through. And especially for personal projects where those projects can take months or even years, if you don't love what you're shooting, you're going to be miserable for a really, really long time. So you might as well find something that you really love doing. And by the way, something you really love doing can be sometimes in conflict with what's something you really care about. You might care a lot about something that you want to photograph because you think it's important to show it to the world, but you may not love photographing it. You may find that it's just really, burdensome for you to go photograph it. And usually that's not such a good idea because unless you really enjoy it, you're not going to spend the time and the effort over the long period of time. Why shoot what you're ideally positioned to shoot? You have to, you have access to it, and you can easily gain access to it. So that's key to do a long-term project. You can return over a long period of time. And it makes the work really deeply personal, in terms of experiences, cultures, languages. And somehow the more personal you shoot something, the more universal it becomes. And I think that's a little bit the case with this new project that I'm doing. I really try to go deep in the story of these people, and the more depth I got, the more it got interesting for more people. I was showing the photos, and it's interesting how the project evolved in that way, the more I got to know them. So just to recap the last few concepts, we saw that most photographers start with at least a vague project idea, but it's also possible to start from individual photographs. And we talked about, to me, the two main ingredients to finding your personal projects is find something you love and something that you're ideally positioned to shoot. So, now I wanted to talk about some traps, some things that might kind of hold you back, and that I really think shouldn't hold you back. One is the "it's been done," thing. So you'll talk about shooting a project about people in the street in Manhattan, or in my case it was Venice Beach. Venice Beach gets 10 million tourists. Over 10 million now every year. It's the second most visited tourist destination in Southern California after Disneyland. More than Hollywood, more than anything else you can think of down there. And so, everybody photographed it. I mean, it's photographed millions and millions of times every year. Winter Grand shot a lot in Venice Beach. So I could easily have told myself, hey, and people were telling me actually, look, it's nice, but it's been done. I felt like, I think everybody can bring a completely different angle to a subject that's been photographed a lot. So I think if you feel like you have a different take, or you can add to the conversation on a topic, the fact that it's been done before shouldn't get in your way. There's always a way, if you really care deeply about it, there's a way that you can make it personal. So I think that's a myth, that it's been done before thing. I wouldn't also overthink it or overplan it. There's something that is natural. When you think about a new project, it's exciting to plan it and kind of try to really get it. But the problem is, you don't shoot when you plan, and then once you get there, it might be completely different from what you thought. So I would really start shooting it as soon as possible and as much as possible, and keep an open mind, because it might completely, chances are, based on those other photographers we just talked about, it will completely change while you're shooting it, or your concept of it. So I would say start and see where it leads you. Don't plan too much. One other thing is not to rush it. we tend to go into projects thinking, okay, I'll be done by a certain date, or personal projects really need time to mature and morph, and you need to be able to experiment with ideas, with techniques, and so on. And sometimes you even need to wait for things to happen. I can remember a time in this project, this year actually, back in February or March, where the family was stuck. The bus was not working anymore. They couldn't turn it on, and they couldn't move, so they were getting parking tickets and so on. But not much was happening because they couldn't go anywhere, and they were kind of stuck. And they were also a little bit depressed about different things, and it was harder to get access. And so it was very frustrating. But about a month and a half later, they decided they were going to get the bus to a repair shop, and they had found a way to pay for it. And it was really, like, all of a sudden, that day, things got very interesting, because the kids were very distraught about their home leaving for the repair shop and where they're going to be for the next week or so while it was getting it repaired. And so all of a sudden, I got all these opportunities to shoot the story, but when for a month and a half, really not much was going on. So like sometimes you just need the time for the plot to sort of unfold, and you just kind of have to be patient with it and just wait for the next opportunity. So those personal projects often take months or years. So it's helpful not to just not set a deadline and just enjoy the process and expect it to be longer than you even think. It might just think. When I started this project, I thought it was going to take me 3 or 4 years. That's because I wanted multiple people and so on. Turned out to be a much simpler project in the end. I was able to kind of bottle up earlier on, but I was going in with like, this is going to be at least 3 or 4 years. One thing that we tend to do, and I know I'm a victim of that too, is to second guess yourself and have doubts along the way, and because it's things change and there's no clear, when you start especially, you don't really know where you're going to end up. So it's just kind of letting go of that and just kind of observing and just kind of trying to stay with it and staying flexible. Also, asking feedback I found is really important. I went to portfolio reviews and showed the work, which is very unusual. Usually you show your work at portfolio review when you're ready to publish something. I went with the project really in like a very raw state. Even before I was focusing on the family only, I showed a whole bunch of stuff, and I got, and I was basically, naked to like all the criticism, and I was inviting it. I was like, just, tell me what you think, and I showed it to like 20 different people who are all in the business, book publishers and magazine editors and museum curators, and I was asking them, tell me, this is the project, and they gave me really, really important feedback that helped me shape the project from there on. So it was a little bit of a humbling thing, because you're really kind of opening the kimono, and just you're really, it's a little bit daunting, but it was very, very productive. In the same vein, don't expect great results early on. Usually the work, what I find is true for me is that on those projects that end up resulting in my most important work, I get a couple of really good shots early on, but they're really few and far between. It's, they're encouraging enough to say, oh, there might be something there, but they don't happen very often, and most of the work is really not that great. And I learned that this is really, you have to kind of be patient with it, because most of the good stuff comes at the end. It comes when you're already intimately familiar with the subject, you've already gained their trust. If you're doing a documentary, you've nailed down your approach, you've made all the connections that you need, you have access, you're more confident, and really, if I charted, I should do it at some point, with all those timestamps that I was talking about. If I charted my output, in terms of what ended up in the book in the end, from the beginning of the work till the end, I would get some sort of curve that would be steadily going up, or even more accentuated than that. Because really the most productive time is the end of the project. In the beginning, you sort of have to take the leap of faith that it will all work out, and just kind of enjoy the journey. So one thing I found to find examples of successful personal projects, I love photo books. So that's also why I make them. But before I made them, I just collected them for, for inspiration. And a lot of those photo books, I was just looking at my collection the other day, a lot of those photo books came out of personal projects. And so it's a great resource, whether you go to the library or you own, some photo books. It's really helpful to see what people did, and the kinds of projects they did and how they shot them and so on. I'm going to show you a few examples here for inspiration. Full disclosure, I have a strong bias for classic black and white documentaries, so you won't see a lot of fine art or other types of projects, but there's a lot more variety than what you're going to see here. I'm just showing you what, what I brought. So family is a super popular topic in personal projects, and it makes total sense if you think of what we just talked about. It's something you love, typically. I mean, for the people who made this work, you have great access to it by definition, and it's very personal. So it really has all the combination of factors here, and a lot of photographers have focused on photographing their own children. These are just a few examples. There's Sally Mann, Christopher Anderson, and Alain Laboile, French photographer. I'm just going to show, this is from Sally Mann's immediate family. This is from Christopher Anderson's book. And this is from one of Alain Laboile's book. It's beautiful work, all three very different, very beautiful, very intimate, and it has, again, family really is something that lends itself well to personal projects. This is from Philip Toledano, who shot his dad, who was dying, and those projects are also, very, you can really feel the emotion, and it's extremely personal. It makes the work really, really strong. Maggie Stever also documented her mom battling dementia over the last years of her life. And she actually, I looked at her website, and she said, "This body of work is the most important one I have ever done and will ever do." And this is from a photojournalist who shot, for 40 years or more, and has done phenomenal work all over the world. But this is what she considers her most important work. So other photographers, again, doing something very personal, documented the community that they lived in or that were close to. In a way, Venice Beach is very much that kind of documentary for me. Martin Parr is very well known for many things, including photographing the working class in New Brighton, which is a beach suburb of Liverpool. And that was in the early 80s. And so he has his own style where he uses the flash a lot, and he's using very saturated color. And he's showing the country in a state of decay at that time, but still finding pleasure wherever it can. And he treats things with a lot of humor and sarcasm. And so it's beautiful work as well. This is a very famous photo book. But again, that was out of this personal project of documenting that beach community. Chris Killip, also documenting northern England in the same period, while it was, industrial northern England was in decline. And his images are completely different, so this is a completely different style, but also beautiful and very personal. This is, again, a community that he was very, very close to. Others documented people in their neighborhoods. So this was Bill Owens, who was documenting his friends and family and neighbors in the Bay Area in the early 70s. And the project was called Suburbia. It was a very successful photo book as well. It's one of the most famous photo books from that time. And he wrote on his website, "This book is about my friends and the world I live in." So in the fall of 1968, I began working as a photographer for the Livermore Independent, so a small newspaper. And my daily routine took me to the homes of hundreds of families. So in just the course of his normal work as a photojournalist, he had access to all these people, and they were part of his community. They were his neighbors and so on. And he just, he made an amazing documentary out of that. But again, very accessible things, things he loved to photograph, and that he had great access to and felt passionate about. Susan Miselis documented, so this is here in New York, she documented the daily lives of a group of local preteen girls in their neighborhood in Little Italy. And she called the project Prince Street Girls. And she ended up photographing them again, at different stages of their lives. And she's still in touch with them, and some of them. And it's one of the most defining projects of her career, even though she's been with Magnum for a long time and she's done a lot of other things. But this is one of her, when she has a major retrospective exhibitions like she just had in Paris, this is one of the biggest projects that she shows. And it's an amazing project. Another New York-based project that I was talking about this right before the talk. Bruce Davidson photographed one block in East Harlem for 2 years in the late 60s, and he went back day in, day out, and just talked to people, knocked on doors, and so on. And the project is known now as East 100th Street, and it's again one of the most defining projects of his career. He's also done other projects on the New York subway, Central Park, Brooklyn. So, you can basically, a lot of these people were basically shooting in their backyard and made amazing projects because the work was so personal and so heartfelt. Projects also don't have to be overly complex in their concept or execution. This is one that I love for its simplicity. And it got a lot of press and a lot of exhibitions, and museums bought the work and so on. This is Susan Barnett, and she shot the back of T-shirts. Basically found people with interesting T-shirts, asked them to turn around, and basically took hundreds of photos of people with interesting T-shirts. And that's the whole project. It's called the typology, this type of project. We were talking about mailboxes or other types of things that ideas like that. When there's something that you think you can get a lot of variations, and it would be interesting to show them side by side. These are typically exhibited like this, side by side, and it's not really in the single photograph that you capture the beauty of those projects. It's really by looking at all of them together. And so this is great, and and the concept couldn't be simpler. This is the most recent example that I came across. It's a book I actually bought on Kickstarter for myself a few months ago, and I just received the book a couple weeks ago. And it's by a British photographer named George Georgiou. And he's in 2016 he decided to crisscross the US looking for parades. And he didn't want to shoot the parades, he just wanted to shoot the people looking at the parades. And it's a phenomenal idea. He well researched. He looked for places where he could show different American demographics. So he was looking at this as an outsider, from England. And over the course of 1 year, he made a few trips, and he visited 26 parades in 24 cities across 14 states. So very well planned project, very well executed. And his book, American Parade, which you might still be able to find if you're fast, because it just won. It was shortlisted by Aperture's prestigious Photo Book of the Year award. So it was exhibited in Paris just a few weeks ago. And it's a phenomenal book just based on that simple concept of people watching parades. Just very well done. So it's a very simple idea again, but just requires obviously interesting execution. So if you've never worked on a personal project, I hope that these examples have inspired you to start one. It's a really exciting adventure. I mean, for me, it brought me into places I'd never thought I'd be, and it will definitely make you a better photographer, regardless of what level you're at, and it will help you get your work published. And I can't wait to find out what you start. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, if you're for the Kickstarter, I'm just giving you the URL if you're interested. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might just want to go to my website, and I'm just going to give you some contact info here. This is for Nick. Oh, yeah, all the images that you saw from my projects I process with Nick Silver Effects Pro, and that's because I like that film look, even though I shoot digital. This is all shot digital. Nick really provides that film look that I like, and I'm able to. I shoot with Leica, and I love what it does with the files. So anyway, if you want to try it out, this is a link to try it out. That's about it. I'd love to go to questions now, if you guys.
A couple of questions.
Sure.
Can a project be photographed abstract photography?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm highly biased towards documentary because that's what I do, but it can be absolutely. It can
a number of years ago, I got the idea of subway walls. Going to different subway stops and photographing the wall. Is that a...
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic idea.
The other question is, how do you know when you're finished?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So there's a lot of, what we covered today is really how to start one. There's a lot of things in between, in terms of how to execute one, and, there's many stages when you're shooting it. And then at the end, there's that question that always comes up is, how do you know you're finished? And to some extent, it's a very gray area. You really have to decide for yourself. When you're, it's an emotional thing. Frankly, the Venice Beach project, I felt like I really wanted to keep shooting it, and I wasn't ready to give it up just because I just enjoyed it so much. So it was a little bit of a letdown to have to kind of wrap it up. And for me, I knew I was done because the publisher was ready for the book, and I was like, okay, I got them, they're ready to do a contract. If I pass this up and I tell them to wait, they may not be ready for it a year from now. So for me, that's what decided me, but it's highly subjective.
Yeah, not everybody has the opportunity to do a book.
No, but you have to kind of figure out for yourself whether you think the work is, you've got enough of a body of work to do what you want to do with it, whether that's publish a book or do something else with it. In the case of my second project, this family living in the school bus, it was easy to determine the end of the project because they left. So at that point, I was like, well, either I can try to go on the road with them, or this is the end of the project. And then I realized I had enough to publish a book with it, but I really didn't know that till they left, and I looked at all the work, and I was like, all right, that's a body of work. But that's a great question. Anything else? Yes?
Do you combine text and interviews with images?
Yeah.
If you do that, how do you balance
That's an awesome question. So for the Venice book, I wasn't really thinking in terms of a book or the finished product, because I really started as a street photography thing, and it kind of morphed into the idea. So I didn't really plan for interviews and things like that. For this new project, I really felt like some of the story happened before I started shooting, documenting the family, and I wanted this to be part of their story. So I decided to do interviews with them. So I have extensive interviews that I did, some of which I'm going to transcribe for the book. The other thing that I thought would be really cool, because after I did the Venice book and I started exhibiting the work, I realized that it would have been great to have some other things, some other forms of media, like video and other things to show people, which I didn't do when I shot the Venice book. So for the new project, I realized one thing very quickly was that the space in which those people lived is very small. And to show that in pictures is hard. You can see that it's small, but you can't really feel it, how small it is. So somebody I spoke with about the project recommended I try VR video, virtual reality video. So I ended up getting they're affordable now. I got a little virtual reality camera, mounted it, and we did several sequences where they were just candidly, living life in that bus. We did one time they were eating pizza, and we put the camera above the pizza, and another time they were just traveling around. Another time they were waking up. I got there the time they were waking up, and we agreed to put the camera in the bus, and we saw like everybody sort of, getting. Actually, two of the kids slept through the whole thing. They didn't even know what was going on, but the rest of them were just, having breakfast and things like that. But it really adds a lot of an interesting perspective to the project. And I'm thinking this could be used for exhibits. So I could have, virtual reality goggles for people to look, to try. As well as obviously photographs on the wall and maybe recordings of the interviews, but it makes it a lot more, multimedia and gives people a lot more depth of the story. Yes.
How did you deal with permissions for the Venice book? Did you have everybody's permission as you went along?
No, so permissions are an interesting thing. The law is such that if it's a public space, you can photograph people without asking them for permission, and you can.
Do you have to have permission to publish?
To publish, yes. So you don't have to have the permission to publish it as a work of art. You would have to have permission if you say you wanted to sell the images to Coca-Cola or something for an ad.
Oh, that's it.
But if it's for exhibitions, if it's for a book, the one sort of gray area that it's better to be safe is for the cover. So for the cover of the book, the one picture I have in the cover of the book, I actually have her permission to use it in writing. But for the rest of them, you really don't need a permission. Now, for the new projects, it's completely different. I was not in a public space. This is their personal space. So I actually got permission from them to use the pictures.
Okay, thanks.
But it depends where you shoot them. And it depends also the country. So in the US,
I know
in France, you
shoot
can't,
anybody.
right, you can't, in France, the street is not, you have to get permission from everybody.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll change that soon, but yes. Yes?
Kind of going back, you were saying, very tight spaces, so, and maybe it's more technically, because it's tight, dark, did you have to, like, in terms of your timing on when you would shoot, things like that, just because of just the sheer fact of lighting?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I told you I showed this at a portfolio review early on, and I actually showed it in color when I showed it because I wasn't sure what it was going to be, and since I was shooting with the M10, I wasn't sure how where I was going to go with it, and I kind of liked some of the color versions of the pictures, so I showed it in color, and basically one of the people who reviewed it is a very experienced, very highly recognized photographer. He's a war photographer, actually. His name is Louis Pelou. And he looked at them and he was like, yeah, you can't, if you're going to shoot this in color, you either have to bring your own lighting or you have to go black and white because the quality of the color, the quality of the light is really very poor, and you're not going to be able to get away. Shooting color, you're not going to be able to get away without artificial lighting in those circumstances. Just, the experience that he had. And I was like, all right, and I'm not a flash person. Plus, I, didn't want to disturb it's really candid. It's a very small space. I'm trying to be the fly on the wall, literally, and to bring a whole set of lights and stuff, it's not going to work. So that's when I decided. I was like,
Be very discreet as you can.
right, exactly. Absolutely.
So that they trust you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the flash was not going to work, so I figured the only option was black and white. But that was a great question, and that was something I was asking myself early on. Yes?
But sort of building on that, in terms of, because they are living their life, so
Yes.
in terms of the access and timing where you go in, how do you navigate that?
So, I mean, it was the same. I actually did this with many different subjects originally and then decided to focus on them. Initially, with a lot of the subjects, I would not even bring the camera out of the bag. I would just sit down and talk to them and talk about, it was helpful that I had the prior, Venice work because a lot of those people were parking their vehicles in Venice. So they really appreciated the work I had done on the Venice book. And so I had some credibility with them. And we were just chatting originally. And, some of them I would chat for 2-3 times before I even pulled out the camera. And they were okay with me photographing, but just I didn't want to yet because I really wanted to establish the relationship first. So, and I'd say initially I try to keep to fairly short sessions with them because I didn't want to impose too much. And then as they got more comfortable with me, and they were, like the kids loved having me in the bus, and there were some days where the kids didn't want me in the bus too. Like the 2-year-old especially was like, one day I remember I showed up and she was like, "No Dotan." No Dotan. And I was like, all right, camera back in the back. And, you just kind of have to work with it, and then, next day, I'd be maybe bringing some candy or something. But, it's those relationships take a while to you kind of, that's also why you need time, And I have a relationship now with, we're dear friends, and a lot of times I'll just show up, and now I don't even photograph. We just hang out and stuff. But it's you really need to give it time, because the trust doesn't get built overnight for sure.
One more question.
Sure.
Are you still doing Venice Beach then?
I might.
Are you still continuing with your Venice Beach stuff?
So I go there from time to time, but because I've been so focused on this project, even though I was shooting in the area, I wasn't really going on the beach as much. It's really, I try to keep that focus because it's a question of resources. I only have so much time, and I want to spend it, on the project itself. When I go, I do still find a lot of the, I was teaching the workshop, the Leica workshop on Venice Beach, and we bumped into a whole bunch of people I knew, and it's always nice to see them and everything. But I have to make an effort to show up every once in a while, because it's a lot of fun to. It's like it's like a reunion, every time I go back. So. Yes.
Have you ever started a project and then realized that it wasn't worth pursuing or it wasn't for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Many. Yeah. Some of which I've put a lot of resources into. And some of them, I don't know if they might get finished at some point. Like it's really a question mark. Just to be completely candid, I have a project on an area in Havana, Cuba, that I showed pictures of previously, and I really like some of the work I did. I love the people that I met there. I just don't feel like I've found something to say about that area that hasn't been said yet. And so I'm not eager to publish it, because until I find that extra thing to say, or that I'm really adding to the conversation versus trying to put my images out there, I'm not comfortable putting it out there. I really want it. So I'm still wrestling with, like, maybe the story's not finished yet. Maybe that area will go through a transformation, or something will happen to it where I'll feel like, okay, I can finally finish the story. But for now, it's up in the air. And I went twice. I photographed for, each time I photographed for like a week to 2 weeks nonstop. And so I have a lot of work already made on that project. But this is one where it's been done a lot before, and unless I have something extra to say, I don't really want to say it yet. I don't feel like it's
So
finished.
do you exclusively shoot with the intent to make a project now, or?
Well, so that if I go
After
back,
your first project, or prior to it, were you just kind of running around shooting whatever? And
yeah, exactly. I think I'm more intentional now, because I really didn't have the concept of a personal project when I first started. And I enjoyed the freedom of it, but I found that because of everything I said today, personal projects have been really productive and also gratifying and fulfilling. So yes, now I'm really looking to kind of at least start with somewhat of an idea. And frankly, this idea of vehicle dwellers, I want to do more of it. So I could see this as like a repeat personal project, where if I find another subject that is worth documenting, I mean, there's many that are worth documenting, but another that I click well with, that I get established trust, and that I think it would be interesting to show, I would definitely do it again. I might.
When I think about doing a personal project, one of the things that stops me is, what am I going to do with the pictures? And I don't know how to get around that sometimes.
Well, I mean, in one way, it's helpful to have a goal for whether you want it published as a book, and a book nowadays doesn't have to be a massively published book. It could be something you publish yourself for your friends and family. But Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think of the outcome now as a book because I've done books before and I like making books. So it's helpful for me to shoot the project thinking of what the final book would be like. But I don't think it's necessary. I think you could start a project and just think, well, I don't know. This might be an exhibit. It might just be, yeah, it might just be for me. It might be published as an article with maybe 10 pictures. It doesn't have to be 60, 70 pictures in the book. Yeah, I think it's helpful to just start without any of that in mind and just see where it goes. It's one of those things that kind of maybe slow you down if you think too much about where it goes. You just want to get into it and see what it lends itself to. Who's interested in it? Who's interested in seeing it? Makes sense. Yes?
In terms of social media,
Uh-huh.
when you start a project and you get very excited with the pictures, how protected you get with not sharing them? I mean, how worthy do you share the pictures, or do they protect it?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing them. I try to be very selective. I don't want to get too excited and show just anything I shoot because I'm sort of overexcited about the fact the project is new and everything. I try to think about it as like the finished project, and if this image, will this image make the cut, or does it have a chance to make the cut? If it does, even if it's not going to end up making the cut, but it's still like a strong image that would be a strong contender, then I would show it on social media. If it's one where I'm like, I'm excited about this week, but might not be excited about next week, then I try to not show it. I mean, that's a personal thing. I mean, some people, and frankly, there's different ways of doing the Instagram feed. Some people love documenting how they work, and sometimes they'll show also the things that didn't work out, or they'll show things that they think are not quite at the level of the rest, but they want to show the process that they're working through. So there's no right way to do it. Personally, I like to really edit and only show the ones that I think are going to be keepers. That's a very personal thing. I think photography is great in that, in a way, what you see here are the very best images that I was producing over a number of years, and that's the luxury of being a photographer, because 99% of the stuff didn't end up here, or more, actually 99 point something, and I don't get I don't have to show you my crappy work, so it's nice to be able to when you're a dancer and you do a dance performance or something, you have to perform live, and whatever happens. Photography, I get to review stuff and say, no, I'm only going to show this one, and so I try to use that.
Is that hard to decide?
It is, and usually you need a little bit of time. I try not to that's also why I try not to post things right away, because usually you don't have the distance to, I try to let it cool down a little bit. I'm excited about an image, let's wait till next week, see if I'm still excited about it next week. And it's I'm still not sure, I'll wait another week. You just kind of let them, kind of like good wine, you just let it age for a little bit, see where, if the excitement stays or not. Anything else? No? Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.